Toppling Bashar al-Assad was not about bringing freedom and democracy to Syria. Toppling Bashar al-Assad was about invading Syria. It was about controlling Syria, and that is the reality. Yesterday, the Israeli government agreed that it's going to expand the settlements on the Israeli side of the Golan Heights. Well, is it a coincidence that the Israeli government has made this clear in the midst of Israel bombing Syria and expanding its military presence into Syrian territory? Turkey is going to further expand itself into Syria. That means that you have a revived Turkish power right next door to Israel, which means that Turkey is going to have direct access right into Israel. And Israel is not going to like this, and it's going to be bloody, and it's going to be ugly. And I think that Israel will eventually be reduced to really a sea of blood. All right, everyone, so I want to talk to you guys about what's been happening in Syria. Well, what's been going on in Syria is quite obvious. It is an invasion. Syria has been getting invaded. Syria has been getting invaded by Turkey for years, because Turkey has had a military presence in that country for years. But now we see Israel expanding itself, expanding its military presence into Syrian territory. And what is this but an invasion? And what is this but Israel showing its true intention of bringing about greater Israel? This is the goal. And there is talk within the Israeli media about how there is a plan by Israel to bring about greater Israel. This is about reviving Solomon's kingdom. And so we see two big regional powers, Turkey and Israel, trying to revive empires. Turkey is trying to revive the Ottoman Empire, and Israel is trying to revive Solomon's kingdom. And so this is what we are witnessing. This is why Israel has been hitting Syria with airstrikes. Over 450 airstrikes have been hit against Syria by Israel, and we have not seen these types of airstrikes hitting Syria since 2012. And so Syria is being invaded, yet we were told for years that toppling Bashar al-Assad is about helping the Syrian people, that toppling Bashar al-Assad is about bringing about democracy and freedom, because Assad is a tyrant, Assad is evil. And so that's the reason why NATO has been backing all these rebels. It's to bring about democracy. Well, that's a bunch of garbage. That's a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of absolute hot air. It's a lie. They said it was about the Syrian people. How is this about the Syrian people when you are invading Syria as soon as you topple Bashar al-Assad? Toppling Bashar al-Assad was not about bringing freedom and democracy to Syria. Toppling Bashar al-Assad was about invading Syria. It was about controlling Syria, and that is the reality. And you have these Hosperists, you have these acolytes of Israel, these propagandists who will come along and they will say, well, no, this is about fighting terrorism, and Israel simply wants to make sure that the rebels don't get too close to Israel. Well, who was backing the rebels? It was Israel that was backing the rebels, of course. Qatar was backing the rebels, the United States was, Turkey was, but so was Israel. And they will always feed to us this idea that Israel is at the front line in the war on terror, that if Israel loses, the terrorists will eventually go into Europe, and then the war against the terrorists will be in Europe and in the West, and then soon, who knows, ISIS will cross the border into Texas from Mexico, and then they're going to try to establish Sharia law, and all the cowgirls are going to be forced to put on hijabs, and then they're not going to be cowgirls anymore. They're going to be cow hijabis, and they're not going to have boots on anymore because their feet are going to be covered with hijabs and veils, and Texas is not going to be called Texas anymore. It's going to be called Texasistan. It's going to be it's going to be crazy, right? So this is the type of this is the type of thinking they try to inculcate into the people, that Israel is at the front line. But if Israel really is at the front line of the war on terrorism, then why the hell was Israel supporting Syrian rebels? Why in the hell was Israel backing members of Jabhat al-Nusra? Jabhat al-Nusra is a terrorist organization. Now it's not called Jabhat al-Nusra anymore. Now it's called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which is now the dominating faction in Syria right now, and it is being backed by NATO. But HTS, when it was known as Jabhat al-Nusra, was being backed by Israel for years. And the Israelis were supporting the Syrian rebels, who were and are still terrorists. And so if you are really all about fighting terrorism, then why in the hell do you back Islamic rebels? Why in the hell do you back people who want to destroy Israel and who want to take over Al-Quds, Jerusalem? The reason why was very simple. Israel simply wanted to use the rebels to topple Bashar al-Assad, and so it backed the rebels to topple Bashar al-Assad. And so it creates the problem, and then it presents itself as the solution, which is one of the oldest strategies ever used in the realm of geopolitics. You back your enemy, and then you use your enemy to back another, to defeat another enemy, and then you go in and you say, okay, we're here now to fight this enemy that we have been backing for years. And let's remember that this is the reason why for years Israel was funding Hamas, because Hamas undermined the Palestinian cause, and it gave the Israelis, specifically Netanyahu and his ilk, the argument that the Palestinian cause is a terrorist cause and thus cannot be supported. So really, Netanyahu and those like him need the presence of terrorism so as to delegitimize the Palestinian cause. So terrorism really has been used as a means to an end, a means to a political end for a very long time. And so this is the reason why Israel was backing Syrian rebels to topple Bashar al-Assad and to then have the argument that Israel must enter Syria to fight against terrorism. So Israel really hit two birds with one stone. They removed Bashar al-Assad, and then they had the space, they had the opportunity to say that Syria is filled with terrorists now, terrorists that we were backing, and so thus we must expand our military presence into Syria. Now, you can make the argument that Bashar al-Assad was an ally of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah was striking northern Israel and forcing thousands, really tens of thousands, of Israelis out of their homes. And you can make the argument that Bashar al-Assad was an ally of Iran, and Iran was backing Hamas, and Hamas did October the 7th, and these are the reasons as to why Israel wanted Bashar al-Assad overthrown. And I will say that that is a legitimate argument and a legitimate point. I do not want to be one of these people who comes out and says Israel is just 100% evil, Iran is 100% good, and there is no legitimate criticism of Iran or Syria. I don't want to be these people. So if supporting Hamas means that you deserve to be overthrown, then by that logic, Benjamin Netanyahu also deserves to be toppled like Bashar al-Assad. I'm not saying that Netanyahu should be toppled, but I'm simply applying that logic to the Israeli government. Here is the thing, though. Turkey and Israel are enemies. Now, they may have diplomatic ties, but they are enemies. So Israel has its expansionistic interests, and so does Turkey. Israel wants to expand its settlements. This is what Israel wants to do. And there is a big movement within Israel that wants to expand the settlements. They want to expand the settlements into Gaza. They want to also expand the settlements into Syria because they believe that Syria was once a part of Solomon's kingdom, and so therefore we're going to revive this Jewish empire.
אני רוצה מדינה יהודית.
שזה אומר מה?
מדינה יהודית. זה נורא נורא מורכב. זו מדינה שמתנהגת לפי עולם הערכים של העם היהודי.
הריבונות של ישראל מתחילה בים ונגמרת בנהר. בשלב הזה, או שבעצם אנחנו גם מוצאים את עבר הירדן? בשלב הבא.
בסדר, לאט לאט. כתוב בחז"ל שעתידה ישראל, עתידה ירושלים להתרחב עד דמשק.
זאת אומרת, אנחנו...
רק ירושלים, עד דמשק.
Now, Israel has stated that they want to do a temporary stay in Syria, but at the same time, Israel has also stated that they will not leave Syria until the situation in Syria is stable. But the situation in Syria is not going to be stable, at least not for a very long time. And Israel wants an unstable Syria.
To what extent is Israel exploiting the power switchover in Syria to its own advantage?
Well, of course, it's exploiting the situation in Syria to its advantage. From an Israeli perspective, it would be irresponsible to do otherwise. Israel has long favored a weak and divided Syria as the best kind of Syria to be its neighbor. And that policy is simply being extended.
Because as long as there is an unstable Syria, Israel has a reason to expand into Syria, and Israel has really a pretext to expand its settlements in that country. And in fact, yesterday, the Israeli government agreed that it's going to expand the settlements on the Israeli side of the Golan Heights. Well, is it a coincidence that the Israeli government has made this clear in the midst of Israel bombing Syria and expanding its military presence into Syrian territory? Israel is expanding into Syria in the name of stopping these rebels from getting too close to Israel. But who was stopping the rebels before? Who was containing the rebels? It was Bashar al-Assad. And who was backing the rebels who were trying to topple Bashar al-Assad? It was Israel. Israel was one of the biggest backers of these Syrian revolutionaries, of these bloodthirsty Syrian rebels. And so now Israel is saying that they are so concerned about these Syrian rebels, but why in the hell did you topple the guy, or why in the hell did you help to topple the guy who was containing these Islamist gremlins, who was fighting these Syrian rebels? The motivation is quite obvious from Israel's actions. The motivation was to cause chaos so that Israel could have the pretext to then enter Syria, and we see Israel doing this right now. I remember years ago the Israeli politician Amos Gilad stating that Bashar al-Assad is not Israel's biggest concern, that Israel was more worried about the Syrian rebels getting their hands on the chemical weapons than they were about Bashar al-Assad. So what in the hell was the point of overthrowing this guy if your biggest concern is actually the Syrian rebels? Israel wants terrorists to overrun Syria so that Israel could have the reason or the pretext, the green light, to then militarily enter Syria. And this is a part of this ideology of Greater Israel and expanding settlements. And eventually, this is what I suspect, eventually there's going to be a clash between Turkey and Israel. These are countries that are not friends. These are enemy countries. Now, they do have diplomatic ties. They are people in Turkey who are friendly towards Israel, and vice versa. They are people in Israel who want to deepen and continue relations with Turkey, but at the same time, there is a very intense anti-Israel sentiment within Turkey. In fact, at one point in time, Hitler's Mein Kampf was a major bestseller back in the early 2000s, I want to say. So there is definitely a Nazistic sentiment in Turkey. And Turkey and Israel both have antithetical interest. Israel wants to bring about this idea of Greater Israel. Israel wants to build more settlements on its side of the Golan Heights, but it also is expanding into Syrian territory itself, going beyond the buffer zone that was agreed upon between Syria and Israel. And this is something that Turkey is against. And recently, Turkey said that Israel needs to stop going into Syrian territory and that Israel needs to withdraw from Syria. Israel is not going to listen to Turkey because Israel is being backed 100% by the United States. Turkey wants to revive its empire, and that means retaking Syria. So how is it going to retake Syria if Israel is in the way? My guess is that there's going to be a clash between Israel and Turkey, and eventually a war. And now that Bashar al-Assad is no longer ruling Syria, and Turkey is going to further expand itself into Syria, that means that you have have a revived Turkish power right next door to Israel, which means that Turkey is going to have direct access right into Israel, and Israel is not going to like this, and it's going to be bloody, and it's going to be ugly, and I think that Israel will eventually be reduced to really a sea of blood, and it's going to be Holocaust 2.0. It's not going to be good for Israel. Bashar al-Assad was presented as the worst guy in the Middle East, or one of the worst guys in the Middle East. He was presented as this evil tyrant, but he was the guy who was fighting the rebels. And now that he has been toppled, Israel is saying, well, we have to fight these rebels. Why do you have to fight these rebels for? Well, because you got rid of the guy who was doing that job for you. And now Israel is going to have to face a revived Turkish power right next door. And it's not going to be pretty. Anyway, guys, this has been really an interesting topic. And you have just heard some theology. God bless.